Hi, my name is Iago, and I'm going to talk about my research, which involves basically an algorithm for the isometric embedding problem for black hole horizons. And I'm going to explain what all these fancy words mean. But first, to get us started, I would like to propose a thought experiment. So suppose you are this little guy here walking on a grid, and suppose that it can be like Earth as you're going to your class or something like that. And suppose that as you are walking, let me start this again. Suppose that as you are walking, you're keeping track of information in your surface. Suppose, for example, you go through a hill or you go through a valley, and suppose that you keep some kind of information about the surface. And based on this, could we figure out that the plane that we were working on was actually a sphere, or a spheroid in case of theory? So this is what the isometric embedding problem looks like. So we are using some information in 2 dimensions, and we are trying to describe an object in 3D. In the example, we are on the surface of Earth, and we try to describe that the Earth is a spheroid. But I also had black holes in the title, and so why are we going to talk about black holes in this presentation? So we're mostly going to focus on the horizon, and there are many definitions of horizons. We have event horizon, we have the apparent horizon, we have black hole shadows. All of those are not relevant for this discussion. We're just going to use the word horizon in this presentation from here on. And the simple definition for this is the horizon is the boundary around the black hole after which light cannot escape. So that's why we see it as dark. So here I have 2 images, one from the famous Interstellar movie. So when we're talking about the horizon, we're talking about this dark region in the center. And same, we have here the first image of black hole, which was captured by the Event Horizon Telescope. And again, here we can see the horizon that's at the center. And when talking about black holes, it's very useful to simulate how they behave. And simulations can be very helpful for 2 things. The first one is to understand observed events, so the things that we observe in our laboratories, and also to predict events. For example, we have LIGO being in the news very recently, and in 2016 they detected gravitational waves for the first time, and actually my collaboration helped to provide the evidence that the data they were collecting was actually from gravitational waves. And also it's helpful to predict events. For example, now we're going to have a new laboratory in space, which is kind of like LIGO 2.0, it's called LISA, and we are, in my collaboration, we actually think of these laboratories as our clients, and we help, we try to explain with simulations what we are observing from the real world. And in all these simulations, it's really important to know what, to describe the horizon somehow. And here I have a simulation from my collaboration, from the SXS collaboration. It's a binary black hole system, and they're going to collide. And over here you see the gravitational wave data, and here is a replay and showing the merger of the black hole. And you can see that in the simulation, we can actually see that there are some deformations in the horizon. So what's the problem? I just showed you a simulation. I'm sort of saying that we need to know the embedding of black holes. So why am I even talking about our research? Well, the problem is that the surface that we just saw in the video was actually not the real shape of the black hole, because there's a problem in general relativity. All the coordinates are arbitrary. It's not really a problem because this is actually how our world works, but it's a problem if we want to abstract some, if we want to see what the black hole would look like, and if we want to compute some of the mass and energy and other properties of the black hole. Just to give a very simple example of what I mean, suppose here we have a plot in polar coordinates. Here we have the r and phi coordinates, and let's just plot the function r equals 1. Right, it's a very simple function, it's a line, straight line. But now if we just make a conversion of coordinates to the usual x and y plots that we have, now what goes with the line is not a circle, right? This is a very famous, very known transformation. And here, these curves show the same thing, this is the same idea, but in just 2 different coordinates, and they look different. So that's the same idea that we're talking about. But now let's look at how it looks like for black holes. So here I have 2 simulations, the one at the top and one at the bottom, to use different coordinate systems. And it might be hard to see, they look very similar here, but I'm gonna play this simulation again. I want you to focus at the center, okay? At the center of, and compare the center of this one with the center at the bottom one. So notice that over here, at the very beginning, there's gonna be a little dip in the center. It might be hard to see in the projector, but believe me that there's a little dip here that you cannot see the one at the top. And this is the same effect we were just talking about. Changing coordinates can change how you see the surface. And if we can choose any coordinate system, why don't we just choose the usual ones that the ones that we are used to? Why don't we just use x, y, and z? Well, that's because to use these coordinates, we need to solve the embedding problem, and it is hard. There are many methods that try to solve this method, but some of them are inefficient, and they also can't handle negative curvatures. And this just means like concave regions, just like the peanut shape that we just looked at. So the goal of my research was to create a better method so that we can describe the horizons in 3D space efficiently. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the way we do this. So to do that, we need to remind ourselves about spherical coordinates. Here we have the x, y, and z axis, and then we can define the three spherical coordinates. Phi here is our polar coordinate. Here we have our zenith coordinate, theta, and then the radius of this sphere in this case. And each of these coordinates have different basis vectors, and here I'm showing them at this point here. And the ones we're interested in are E theta and E phi, so these are what we're going to refer to from now on as the Gaia vectors. And with these vectors, we can describe any surface in spherical coordinates. This is the most mathy part of the presentation. I'm going to talk about the embedding equations. So to solve this embedding problem that I just talked about, we need to solve these system of equations here. At the right, we have the metric tensor. This is a very complex mathematical structure using general relativity to describe surfaces. But for our purposes, this is given because this is what we get from the simulation of black holes. And so we need to solve what's on the left here. We have x, y, and z. Those are our embedding functions, or our embedding coordinates. And notice that this is a very hard problem, right? We have here partial derivatives, and they are nonlinear because we are squaring them and multiplying them together. So it's a really hard problem to solve, either computationally. Like many methods, as I mentioned before, have tried to solve this, but they're inefficient, or they can't handle, like they blow up in some specific cases. In our research, we use the dyad vectors that we just talked about, E theta and E phi, which are just the partial derivatives of our embedding functions. And if we just use this simple transformation, we can represent the same equations in this simpler system here. So this is actually a parabolic system of partial differential equations, and this is easier, or easy-ish, to solve because we have done many research in this kind of equation before. Another quantity that is important to define here is the commutator. And so if dyad vectors represent a coordinate system, they should commute. And what does that mean? That means if you want to go from point A to point B, and you take this red vector and then a blue vector, if the vectors are commutative, it should be the same thing as first taking the blue vector and then the red vector. So this is the idea. And for this to occur, we need to have we define this quantity here that I'm calling the commutator, and this should be equal to 0 if this is true. And with this idea, we can define our solver in a very, very high level structure. So we start with the metric tensors, which is given by the simulations of black holes. This is found by solving the Einstein equations of general relativity, which is not part of our solver. And then we put this to find our dyad vectors using the two conditions that we just talked about. From this, we find the dyad vectors, and then from this, we need to solve. We need to find the embedding functions that correspond to these dyad vectors, and then we find x, y, and z. And in all of this, we have a lot of C++ code, but I'm not going to talk about it because we don't have enough time. So now let's talk about some of the results. So I have many possible shapes here. All of these are possible shapes that we can have in a simulation of black holes. I'm not going to go into much detail because we're running out of time. But here we have a curved horizon. This means a rotating black hole. Here we have an ellipsoid and an x-peanut. The peanuts are useful because as we saw in the simulations, that's what we see when black holes merge. And here we also have the dense sphere, which is just a sphere with dense at the poles, and then some more peanuts. And so here you can see that we can actually solve many possible cases in simulation of black holes, and many of them are challenging to other problems, just like the Venus that we talked about. We can also analyze our solver, and here at the top I have a time complexity analysis. So here, as we increase the grid space, the grid resolution, we look at how long it takes to run the solver, and we actually see that it's much, it has the potential to be much better than previous methods. Here we see that the time complexity has n to the power of 4, and some of the previous methods have time complexity has n to the power of 6, and so this is much better, but we hope to make it even better, as I'm going to explain in the next slides. We can also analyze the convergence rate of our solver. So here, again, I have the grid resolution increasing, and then here we can look at how the error decreases. So here we see a quadratic convergence, which agrees with our theory, because in the solver we were using second order finite difference approximations. In conclusion, we were able to solve the embedding problem using a C++ code, and it worked for all of the cases we tested, and many of them were really challenging, and it has the potential to be much faster than previous methods. For the future, we hope to improve our method and make it much faster than it is right now. We hope to do so by using a few improvements, just like the implicit time stepping and the multi-core processing. We also hope to implement this in the codes from my collaboration. This was all done in a separate C++ code, and so we want to implement it in Spectre, which are the codes from my collaboration. We also hope to create simulations of these black holes with their real shape, just like we saw some videos at the beginning of the presentation, but I said that those are not the real shape of black holes, so now we hope to recreate those simulations, but with the actual shape of black hole. Some acknowledgements. My advisor, Rob Owen from the physics department, previous Oberlin student, Henry Zhu, who's now at Princeton. We have meetings every week to talk about research. My collaboration, the SXS collaboration, and also Oberlin College, of course. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I will move to questions.
Thank you, Iago. So yeah, we'll see if anyone has any questions. Yeah.
I have a specific question about your tensor analysis for the second order differential PDE. So what specific approximation method do you use? Or which code, which platform did you use?
So the tensor, as I mentioned, is given for our simulation. So in here, we're only interested in 3 components of the metric tensor, right? We're not looking at the whole mathematical structure of the tensor, just the theta, phi, components of the metric tensor. And so this just means we're going to have 3 equations of the metric tensor. So we do some derivation of the metric tensors that we are interested in solving. For example, for the round spheres, it's much simpler, but from our complicated cases, we need to actually derive the metric tensor. But so the right sides here are all given. And then, yeah, it's like the input of our solver. So as I mentioned here in it's like going to be the input of our solver. We solve a bunch of things, and then we end up with the embedding functions.
Actually, my question is not very related to the research, but like why you're using C++, like your method is already complicated, why you're not using Python? Because like for statistical modeling, Python is easier to use.
Well, that ends up being about efficiency. So if you even, actually, we do have a code in Python to solve all of this, and it actually works. It's just one file in Python, but in C++ code it's like a very huge code. I've been working on it for like 2 years. But if you actually compare the time complexity of the Python code with the C++ code, it's just like, it's unfeasible to work with Python for this kind of research, because, for example, some of these computations are going to take like a week or even months. For my purposes, all the simulations I do are like up to 3 hours, just because this is like a very complicated problem to solve. And so that's why we need to go with C++. Otherwise, what is months will be years